Data suggests these blue states are more hostile to black people than Florida. I mean, we all know that the NAACP is a joke. They have absolutely done nothing to actually advance black people. In fact, we all know who's behind the NAACP is not black people who founded the NAACP. But I'm not going to get into that right now. But those who cannot be spoken of are the people that's behind the NAACP, really, its foundation. Um, but we're going to talk more about what states are actually worse than Florida for black people, because the whole premise of the NAACP coming out against Florida is ridiculous. But before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button, share this out so we get this information out there. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and hit that alarm bell so you know when I'm putting out new stuff. Also, check out my link tree in the description. It has a link to my Patreon where I talk about things I can't talk about here. There's also a link to my Instagram and my merch store where I have I Will Not Comply t-shirts. All right, let's talk about this news. If you believe that Florida is openly hostile towards black people, you should check out the data from states that boast, quote, progressive leaders. You should also, according to the editors of the Washington Examiner, stop listening to, quote, such fallen organizations as the National Association for Advancement of Colored People, or NAACP. And, I've always been on NAACP case, because they are actually the antithesis. They're antithetical to black people. Actually, they're actually hurting black people instead of helping black people. Where are they in? You don't see anybody from the NAACP at the abortion clinics to stop black babies from being aborted. You don't see them in the black neighborhoods where black people are getting killed. So what are they? How are they actually advancing black people? But I digress. The NAACP targeted the Sunshine State and Governor Ron DeSantis in an ill-conceived publicity stunt that warned black vacationers against traveling to Florida. Like, black people really gonna listen to that? I mean, they're irrelevant. The NAACP is irrelevant anyway. But, quote, Florida is openly hostile towards African Americans. First off, we don't like being called African Americans. Call us Black Americans, but don't call us African Americans. I don't know anyone from my family that ever been to Africa. I believe my people were some of the indigenous people that were here first. We didn't come over on boats, so please stop calling us African Americans. It's ridiculous. And there's only a handful of people that went before. Went to the government and asked us to be called African Americans. I believe in the 80s. What was it? Jesse Jackson and his ilk, without conferring with the rest of black people in America. They just came up with this term. But anyway, I digress again. People of color and LGBTQ plus individuals, and see what it's really about here. That's what it's really about. They could care less about black people. Black people are now being put back to the back of the bus for the alphabet community. That's what it's really about. Has nothing to do with black people anymore. The same thing with Black Lives Matter, who was founded by black lesbian women. They don't really care about black men either. Similar to the NAACP, it's all about the alphabet agenda now. But the so-called civil rights organization declared ahead of DeSantis' official presidential campaign launch, quote, before traveling to Florida, please understand that the state of Florida devalues and marginalizes the contributions of and challenges faced by African Americans and other communities of color. See, now they throwing other communities of color in there. It's not just about advancing black people anymore now. It's about advancing all people of color and the alphabet, the LGBTQ agenda. That's what it's really about there. Never mind that the chairman of the board of directors of the NAACP, Leon Russell, lives in Tampa, Florida. The group insisted is a bad place for African Americans to be. Quote, the travel advisory comes in direct response to Governor Ron DeSantis' aggressive attempts to erase black history and to restrict diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in Florida schools, the NAACP stated. So now we see what it's really about. Diversion, equity, and inclusion. That's what they're really pushing. Again, we know that's a Marxist communist thing that they use to try to bring in their communist agenda. But the NAACP was correct in saying that DeSantis was standing against DEI programs in his state schools, and according to the Examiner editors, that's a good thing, and I agree. Quote, on the second charge, restricting DEI programs in Florida schools, DeSantis will probably agree, they write. DEI programs are proven failures that only increase racial division. Every governor should be eliminating their use across the state government. But when it comes to teaching black people history, the NAACP failed to do their homework. I mean, because they're not stopping black history. See, this is what happens when people don't know what they're talking about. They just spewing points that they hear on TV without doing their own research. But, quote, Florida schools are required by law to teach, quote, the history of African peoples, including the passage to America and the enslavement experience, the editors explain. These lessons include how the freedoms of a person have been infringed by sexism, slavery, racial oppression, racial segregation, and racial discrimination. So where are they? It's by state law they have to teach this. So what are they talking about? They're just talking about fake history like the 1619 Project that Patrisse Cullors and her ilk been pushing, which is not really history. Even historians speak about how the 1619 Project and critical race theory is not really founded in any history. If the NAACP is looking for states with policies that create hostile environments for blacks, is looking in the wrong place. Assuming the NAACP actually cares about such things, it should be focusing on California, Illinois, and New York, all of which is led by Democrats, I should add. Reports from the Examiner say at the end of 2022, the national black unemployment rate stood at 6.1%. In Florida, it was more than 2 points lower at 3.8%. Meanwhile, black unemployment was higher than the national average in California, 7.5%, Illinois, a whopping 10.9%, and New York at 8.3%. This story is worse in democratically run cities. In New York City, for example, 12.12% of blacks are unemployed. Compared that to Miami, where the black unemployment rate is 4.7%. If you are a black person looking for a job in California, Illinois, and New York, are far more hostile environments than Florida, the editors write. And they assert black people know this, even if organizations such as the NAACP, which claim to speak for them, do not. And they do know this, but there's not about, this is politics. This is not about actually advancing so-called colored people. This is politics. You know, it's ran by a bunch of leftist old loons that are pushing this leftist agenda, because they're not actually doing anything to help black people. Like I said, they do give out some scholarships here and there, but aside from that, that's it. But, quote, that is why black families, especially middle-class black families, are leaving democratically run states in droves, the editor states. And unlike the NAACP, it appears that they have actual statistics to back up their claim. New York City has lost 9% of its black population over the past 20 years. Over the past 40 years, the black population of Compton, San Francisco, Oakland have fallen by 45, 43, and 40% respectively. Black families are fleeing Chicago too. Meanwhile, Florida black population has grown from 3.1 million in 2010 to 3.8 million today. Quote, the NAACP claims to be an organization committed to a world without racism, where black people enjoy equitable opportunities and thriving communities. And y'all know how I feel about equity, but I'm going to leave that alone for right now. And they go on to say it may want to spend less time worrying about thriving, happily employed black communities in Florida, and more time figuring out which democratic policies are destroying the black communities in blue states. And I totally agree with that. But let me know what you think. Leave your comments down below. Like, share, subscribe, and check out JJThePsychotherapist.com for the latest in news. Until next time, peace.